Hello and welcome to this second recording in the Azure demo series. Today's lab is focused on managing Microsoft Azure, and I'll be going through different exercises and tasks of familiarizing ourselves with the Azure portals. So I want you to first notice that portals, it's plural, not singular. So there are different portals that we'll go through today. So then we'll move over to testing some Azure Resource Manager features, and then finally we'll make use of Azure PowerShell and Azure CLI to manage our Azure environment. So the instructions that I'll be following today, if I go back to the main URL that I pointed out in the last recording, so I'll be following the instructions in this 20533D lab ak_01.md. So if I go ahead and right click and open that in a new tab. So this is what I'll be going through today. So before proceeding, ensure that you have your lab VM ready. So if you're not sure how to do this, or if you're not sure what this is, please refer to the first recording in this series. Let's get into the first exercise for today. So going back to the Azure portal, I logged in. If I log into it, and then if I go on the virtual machines, I'll go ahead and click on my virtual machine. And under the overview section, I should get the public IP. If I bring up remote desktop, put in the public IP and connect to it. I'll put in my username, which is already entered there, and put in my password. So here we go. Now I'm logged into my machine. So first thing that we're doing in today, so let's go through the very first exercise. So first exercise will be using the Azure portals, and task 1 will be on using the Azure portal. So our goal in this particular task will be to familiarize ourselves with the navigational features and functionality of the Azure portal. Again, if you need to have this link open, as that's what we're following today. So let's get into that. So first thing that I'll do is I'll bring up Internet Explorer on this machine, and then I'll type https portal.azure.com without the extras. So it's going to ask me to sign into my Azure account. I put in my email address and then put in my password. So first thing that we'll do in this task is to learn how to edit the dashboard. So you can see the dashboard here. I have a main dashboard. If I click the drop down, I can have multiple dashboards I can create, and I can just move between them. If I go ahead and click on edit and dashboard here, I could move some of these tiles around and position them as I wish, or for whatever is best for me. And this is completely based on each user. So this will be just for my account whenever I log in, not for everyone that logs into this, except they're using the same credentials, which is not good. So if I go ahead and click on done customizing here, that's me finished customizing, and then it saves that. If I go ahead and edit the dashboard again, if I want to revert this back to the default state, I can always right click anywhere and click on reset to default state. It's going to ask me to confirm, and then if I click yes, it's going to reset this dashboard to its default state, and then I can click on done customizing. If I wanted to, I could create a new dashboard, put different tiles that I may want on that, resize them as I may want. So I can click on these 3 ellipses here, and then I can set the size, whatever size that I want in there, and move things around and give it a name. And then if I click done customizing, I can move between the dashboards that way. So the other thing I can do is if I click on the more services here, so I have all these different tiles to the left hand side. If I want subscriptions, for example, to also be on this list, I can click on this star here and that will add subscription there. If there's any option that I want to take away, so let's say I don't want Azure Cosmos DB, for instance, I can search for it and then remove the star there. And then if I go ahead and close this, also I can drag this as I want to position them as I want in this environment. So that's been done. The next thing that we'll do is we'll move to task number 2 now. So let's move to task number 2. And that's about using the Azure account portal. So the goal for this task is to familiarize ourselves with the use of the Azure Account Center to manage account subscriptions. So Azure Account Portal is a different portal to the main Azure portal. So Microsoft are trying to put everything into one, but as of now, it's still a different portal. One thing I forgot to mention about this, it's not part of the main lab, but also is if you double click anywhere, you can change the color scheme to whatever suits you. So let's go through this. So for the Azure Account Portal, if I bring up a browser and a browser tab and I type in https account.windowsazure.com. So if you notice, that's just account singular, not plural. If I go ahead and click on sign in the top right corner there, so this is the portal that we can use to manage subscriptions that we have in our Azure account. So this may be a bit slow, so it may take a while to log me in. Again, it's one of the older portals. And I think I may pause this recording and then resume once it's fully loaded. So that's fully loaded now. So as you can see, I have a single subscription, which is the Azure Pass subscription. I can click on that subscription there. If I had multiple, I will see them in this list here. I can add subscription if I wanted to. Hopefully that's much faster than the sign-in, which took quite a while. So I think, okay, yep, here we go. So first thing that we can do is we can see a billing summary on this page under the subscription. So I can see a bit of billing summary of what I've been charged so far. I can also see my current balance. In this case, I can see my subscription status here also. I can see some other options here, like I can manage my payment methods, use that to add maybe a debit or credit card if I'm using pay as you go. This is a useful one that I can use to download usage details. If I go ahead and click on that, so this is useful if I want more detailed summary or detailed report on my usage. I can click on that option that I did there. And then on the download usage, if I click on the drop down there and then select version 2 preview, what it should do is it should download a CSV file that I could either open in an application like Microsoft Excel. In this case, I will just use Notepad so you can see what it looks like. So you can see it prompting me there. If I go ahead and click on save and then click on open. In this case, I don't have Excel installed on this machine. I'll unselect or deselect this option and just click open using Notepad. So you can see this is a much more detailed report of the spend or the usage of my Azure subscription. So this is one way that we can get that. Okay, so that's been done now. We'll move over to exercise number 2 now. So if I move down a bit, and in exercise number 2, it's about using the Azure Resource Manager features. So features like tagging and role-based access control and resource groups. So let's go to task number 1. So in task number 1, we'll create and manage a resource group. So what we are trying to do is we're going to create a resource group called 20533D0101-lab-rg. So a resource group. I've just put some description here. It's a logical container for Azure resources. It simply stores metadata about the resources and not the resources themselves. Let's go ahead and just do this task. So for this task, if I go back to the Azure portal, if you've closed it, just go back to https://portal.azure.com. Under here, if you click on resource groups to the left, so resource groups to the left, and then you can click on the option to add a new resource group. It's going to prompt us to fill in certain information, mainly the name. If I put in the name that we have in our instructions there, if I have more than one subscription, select the subscription I want and put it in a location that's probably closest to you or the location that you want. So I'll leave that as West Europe, and then I'll click on create. And that does not take long at all, and it finished creating my resource group. And the resource group, essentially, as mentioned, it's where it's going to store metadata about our resources, just a logical container for administration. Next thing that we'll do is we'll move to task number 2. Task number 2, if I bring up this, is we'll create an Azure resource. The goal that we're trying to achieve is we're going to create a root table, or route table, however you pronounce it. You're going to create this root table called this name, and we're going to put it in the resource group that we created earlier. So let's go ahead to do that. So here, if I click on new, and then if I click on networking here, and then if I click on route or root table, and under here I can specify a name. I'll specify the name that we have in the instruction, specify my subscription. In this case, I will not create a new resource group. I'll select the existing resource group that I created earlier, which is this one, and leave the location as the same, and then click on create. So now what I have is I have my, or once this is this completes, is I should have my resource within my resource group. So if I go under resource groups there and then click under my resource group, I should see that I have my new route table resource there. So the next thing that we'll do is, let's bring up, so task number 3, which will be configuring tagging. So tagging is a very useful feature of the Azure Resource Manager that we can use to identify and do a lot of interesting stuff with our resources in Azure. So the goal that we're trying to achieve in this is to tag our resource group that we created earlier and our route table resource, just to give us an idea of how tagging works. So to do that, ensure that you go under resource groups and select the resource group that you created earlier, and then under that, if you click on tags, so now I can click on tag, I can call it whatever name I want and then assign a value to me. So I decide that. So in this case, for name, I'll go ahead and type project, and for the value, I'll go ahead and type test, and then I have the option to save this here. So if I go ahead and click save, that saves it. So what I'll now do is if I go back on the overview here, where I can see my resource, if I click on my route table resource, and then if I click on the tags, so once I've created a tag somewhere, I can just click on the drop down to select the tag and select the value that I want. And if I go ahead and click save to that, so now I've just tagged my resource group and my route table resource. If I go under more services here, and if I search for tags, and then if I click on tags here, I should be able to see a list of all my current tags. And one of the things I could do is if I have a whole list there, I could click on that tag, which would consist of the name, value pair, and then I will be able to see all the resources that have that tag. So you can see how useful this can be. The other thing that I could do is I have this option here. I can pin this to the dashboard. If I click on this option, it says I've already pinned to the dashboard. If I click on Microsoft Azure there to go to my main dashboard, I can see my new project tag that's been pinned to the dashboard, and I can click on it and it's going to show me all the resources with that tag. So that's been done. Let's move over to the next task. So the next task, which is task number 4, will be to configure role-based access control. And the goal is to configure role-based access control on the resource group that we created earlier. What we're trying to do here is to add a contributor role for a user account. So just to show some of the differences between Azure Service Manager and Azure Resource Manager, which allows us, Azure Resource Manager allows us to configure more granular controls over resources. To do this, if you go on the resource groups here, and I'll select the resource group that we created earlier. And then in that resource group, under access control IAM, identity access management, that's where I can configure my role-based access control. And for this, if I want to add a new permission, I can click on add, and I select the role that I want to add. So in this case, if I click on this drop down and select the contributor role, and then who do I want to assign this role to? So do I want to assign it to an Azure AD user, a group, or even an application? In this case, I will just select my Azure AD user account. So it won't make any difference anyway. But if I go ahead just to show you how this works, and then if I click save on that, so that saves that, and I now have contributor role. And then I could click on the contributor role to see what permissions that I provide to all the different Azure resource types. For example, I could click on that and I can see I only have read permission to this resource type. And if I wanted to, I could create a custom role and then give different accounts different permissions that way. So that being said, let's move over to exercise number 3, which will be the last exercise. Oh, sorry, there's 4. So not the last one yet. So exercise number 3 is all about using Azure PowerShell. So we have 2 tasks. Task number 1, let's connect to our Azure subscription by using Azure PowerShell. And our goal is to connect to Azure subscription using PowerShell just for administration. Let's go ahead and do that. Going back here, what I'll do is if I right click on PowerShell here, and then if I click run as administrator. So I have PowerShell here. So I could use this. Or another thing I could do is if I right click on PowerShell, I could click run ISCS administrator. And that will open the PowerShell integrated scripting environment for me, which I have here. Now there are a few commands that we're going to be using today. So the very first thing that we need to do is to log into our Azure environment using PowerShell. Same thing that we did using the portal. So the command is add Azure RM account. It's all in the instruction. If I press enter to that, it's going to ask me to sign in with my account email and my password. So I'll put that in here. And then if I click on next, I can put in my password. And then if I click on sign in, and that should sign me into my Azure account. Now my Azure account could contain more than one subscription. I could have multiple subscriptions in my Azure account. And the way to get a list of my Azure subscriptions is by using the command get Azure RM subscription. If I press enter to that, it's going to show me I only have one subscription called Azure Pass, and it's going to show me the ID for that subscription. The other thing that it's important to note is Azure Resource Manager has a lot of resource providers. So if you want to have a look, for example, at a list of all the providers we have, the command is get Azure RM resource provider. And if I press enter to that, it's going to list a lot of providers for me. So You can see some of the providers here. And actually the ones that it's listing for me here are the providers that are registered. So I could list all where it's going to show me all the providers registered or not. So let's move over to task number 2 now. Task number 2, we're going to manage our Azure resources and resource groups by using Azure PowerShell. And our goal is to use some Azure PowerShell commandlets to manage our Azure environment. So we'll create, and what we're planning to do is we're going to create a new resource group in the same location as the resource group that we created earlier. So we created a resource group called 20533D0101. We're going to create a new one called 2053D0102. And then we'll create this using PowerShell, by the way. And then what we'll then do is to then use Azure PowerShell to move our root table resource from the resource group that we created earlier, which is this one, into this new resource group. So let's go ahead and do that. In order to do this, let's open one of our lab materials. So if I click on File and I click on Open, go under the E drive, and then under the E drive, if you go on the lab files, on the lab 01, on the starter, and then open set 20533D0101 lab. So if you open that, you should come to this. So the first thing that we'll do is, if we look at this, we have a resource group name 20533D0101, which is the existing resource group that we have. This is the resource group that we'll be creating now, which is 0102. So we're just storing these values in variables. And then we're going to store the name of our Azure resource table, which we currently have, into a variable also. So first thing that we want to do is we want to identify the location of our existing resource group. And to do that, we'll use this command here. It's all in the GitHub instructions that I'll put the link below. So I can highlight on everything here and then click on Run Selection. So to make this a bit clearer, I'll use CLS to clear the screen. And then if I go ahead and click Run here. So having run this, if I go ahead and just select lock name variable, and then if I run that selection, you can see that it obtains the location that I created my former resource group in. So because what we want to do is we want to use the value of this location to create a new resource group in that same location. So to do that, the command that we'll use is this: rg2 new Azure RM resource group. We'll give it the name that we'll put in this variable, and then we'll put it in the location that we got earlier. So what I'll do is, if I select this, before running this, by the way, if I go back to the Azure portal, and if we look here, if I refresh this, you can see I only have this D0101 resource group. Let's go ahead and run this now. So if I go ahead and run selection, and that's completed. If I go back to the Azure portal and I refresh, I have a new resource group, and we've created that using Azure PowerShell. So the next thing that we'll do is we'll retrieve an object representing our resource and store it in a variable. So we want to get our existing route table resource, and then we want to put that in a variable. To do that, the command that we'll use is this. So that is res for our resource, get Azure RM resource, and that has this resource name, which is a root table or route table resource name, and that's inside this resource group here. So if I go ahead and highlight that and then click on run selection, and then if I leave that, if I go ahead and then just run that variable, check what's in that variable, I can see it contains my route table. That's fine. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to move our resource that we've identified from its current resource group of D0101 to its new resource group, which will be the new one that we created earlier. To do that, what we'll do is use this command here. And then that will be move Azure RM resource. Destination resource group will be a new resource group name, and resource ID will be the resource that we identified earlier. So let's go ahead and run that. If I go ahead and click run selection, it's going to ask me, am I sure I want to move this resource from one resource group to another? If I go ahead and click yes on that, so this may take a while to complete, but the end result of that, if I go on the D0101 and if I refresh, I can see my route table is in here. At the end of this operation, my route table should not be in here anymore. It should be in this resource group. So I'll just carry on monitoring this resource group till everything is done. By the way, I think I'll pause this recording in order not to make it go longer than it should, and then I'll resume it once the move has completed. Okay, so the move completed now. If I go back to the Azure portal and then if I refresh here, I can see that my route of routes table, it's now in this new resource group. The other thing that that we're going to do is we're just going to view the resources using PowerShell in the new resource group. So to do that, we'll use this command here, which is get Azure RM resource, where object resource group name equals to this resource group name. That is the resource group that we just created. So let's get the resources in that. And we can see that our routes table, it's now in that resource group. Okay, so let's move over for the final exercise in this. So the final exercise is to use Azure CLI, and we have two tasks similar to what we did for PowerShell. Number one, connects to Azure Subscription using Azure CLI. Number two, manage Azure resources and resource groups by using Azure CLI. Let's go ahead to do that. First of all, connect to Azure subscription using Azure CLI. So to do that, if I right click on the command prompt here and click run as administrator. And to connect, I'll use the command az login. And if I press enter to that, I'm prompted to go to this URL and I'm given a code to enter once I get to that URL. So I'll bring up a new browser tab and I'll put in the URL there. And then I'll go ahead to copy the code that I was asked to enter and I'll put in the code there and I'll click on continue. So I select the account I want to use to log in, which is the current account I'm logged in into the portal as, and then I'll click on that. We could not sign you in into this application with your user account. Your account may not work with this application. Yeah, okay, maybe if I go use another account, let's try that. And then go next. So now I'm signed in. So if you get the same error message that I got, just go ahead and type in the email or the password manually. And now you can see I'm logged into the Azure CLI. So the very first thing that we're going to do, which will be moving over to task number 2 now, is we want to have a quick look at Azure account. And I'll use the command az account show. And that shows me more information about my Azure account. What about the information that we saw earlier from by using PowerShell, which is a list of the Azure resource providers? Now, if I run this, this will not only show me resource providers that are registered in my subscription, but even the ones that are not registered. So if I type the command az provider list, and you can see I have a lot more providers here listed if I use Azure CLI, and you can see some of them are registered, some are not registered, but they're still displayed to me. So I won't go through a list here, but you can see it's even giving me more information about which locations that this resource providers are currently, out of it, the resource types are currently available. So it's a bit much more verbose than the same command in PowerShell. I'll just use the CLS button to clear the screen a bit. So the next thing that I would do is, if I bring back this, which is the final task for today, manage Azure resources and resource groups using Azure CLI. So the goal of what we'll do is we want to move a route table resource that we moved to resource group 0102 earlier. We're going to move it back to resource group 0101, and we're going to do that using Azure CLI. Let's go ahead and do that. So first of all, let us see the content let's see this resource group. So we can see this resource group here, which is the one that we want to move it back to. Let's list all the resources that are in a 0102 resource group. If I press enter to that, it's going to show me that I have my resource, the route table, in this resource group now at the moment. The thing that I want to make a note of is I want to make a note of the ID. So 1 minute here. So let's go. So I want the ID of this resource, and I'll put that in Notepad. So to do the move, this is the command that we use, and I'll just edit it in Notepad first before putting it in the command window. So this is the command that we use, but what I want to do is I want to replace IDs here with the ID that I copied from my root table resource earlier. So if I copy this, and then if I replace this here, and then I can copy this command and then go back to paste it here. And then if I run this command, oh, and there's an error there, so I need to put a space here. So do not forget that. So that's running now, and what should happen is if I go back to Azure Portal, this resource will move back from D0102, and by the time it completes, if I go back to D0101, I should be able to see this resource moved back here. So what I'll do is I'll pause this recording, and once it's completed, I'll resume the recording to conclude this video. Okay, so the move completed now. If I go back to my Azure portal, and then if I refresh this, I have my resource back in its original resource group. So to conclude the lab itself, we'll remove all the resource groups and resources that were created earlier. So to do that, I will use this command, remove 20533D environment. So you'll only be able to use that command if you, number one, have copied the modules like we did in the first recording in this series. So if you're not sure what we're referring to, refer to that recording. And then we'll need to use these three commands also, ensure that we import the module. So to do that, if I go bring up Azure PowerShell, and number one thing I'll do is I'll set execution policy to unrestricted and type A. I'll then go ahead and import the module that we copied in the from the first recording. And then if I type R for run once, and then if I use this option to now remove the environment completely. It's going to ask me to sign in. If I type in the day, the day pass 04, put in my password and then sign into that. So it's going to ask me, am I sure I want to run that? I'll go ahead and type R for run. Which lab do I want to remove? I've just completed lab number 1. So if I put lab number 1 there and I press enter, do I want to proceed? Yes. I'll type yes, Y for yes, and press enter. Then it's going to begin to delete the object. And the objects that it should delete hopefully are the resource groups that I created in this lab or in this demo. So these two. So it's going to get rid of them and the resources in them. Again, you see, it's one of the reasons why I recommended to not do this in a production environment. If something were to be wrong with the script, accidentally deletes a resource, you don't want it to be a very vital resource that gets deleted. So please, again, do not do this in a production environment. I hope that this video has been very useful to you. Watch out for the next recordings in this series. So in the very next recording, let me show you what we're going to cover. So if I go all the way to the top and go to the root and go for lab 02 under instructions. And this will be about Azure networking. So we'll be creating an Azure network, creating an Azure network pairing, doing user-defined routing in Azure, and all those other interesting stuff. So thanks very much for sticking around. I'll see you in the next recording. Bye for now.